Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I've got an interesting video here, at least I think it will be. It's from Ember, and it is, do Americans really have the original British accent? Um, this is interesting. Uh, so I did a video a while back from somebody who studies dialect and stuff like that, and they uh, were saying that the closest thing to at least the British accent back when we were fighting, and I guess you guys originally got here, was that basically the closest thing today is an Appalachian accent, which is from the area where I was born, up around West Virginia, going through Kentucky, I guess, coming down towards North Carolina and all that. But that's kind of crazy to me because I would never think of that as being anywhere close to British. Tends to be called a hillbilly accent here and is pretty looked down upon. I think typically if somebody hears that accent, they think that this person is uneducated. They're probably poor. It comes with a lot of connotations. So I'm interested in what this video has to say about it. I will link it in the description if you guys want to check it out yourself, which I absolutely encourage, or any of their other videos. I'll also have links to Patreon. If you haven't done so, go check it out. You can sign up for free, get access to tons of shows, and it helps support me to keep doing these videos and videos over there. I'll also have links of how you can support the channel here on YouTube if you want to. Also, the link to my new sports channel. Still trying to get 1,000 subscribers over there. Getting closer. But shoot, yeah, let's just jump into it.
Many years ago, probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, I got into an argument with a friend from America. I don't remember what the context was, but I remember him saying something along the lines of, well, my accent is the original British accent from the colonists and yours came after. I didn't really get this take at all, since there wasn't a single British accent to speak of. There never has been. Every region, city and hilltop has had its own accent for hundreds of years. Hell, even the birds have regional accents. How could my friend's accent have been the accent for the entirety of Britain? I just thought he was talking a load of fluff and moved on from that. A couple years later, when I cared enough to do some actual research, I found out that the claim had some actual basis to it. The accent that was taken over to the New World did exist at the time, both at home and in the colonies. Unfortunately for my lovely American friend, it was a little more complicated than that. Let's take a look at some history of some accents across the English-speaking world, because apparently surface-level linguistics is something we like here on the channel.
Yeah, because you guys are still like the heads of like Canada, which they sound a lot like an American, or maybe we sound like Canadians. I don't know. There's very subtle differences, but if you were to get somebody from really up north here, they're going to sound very similar to Canada. There's a guy that I watch pretty regularly. He just kind of drives around. He's Canadian. He drives around and he'll stay at different, like a lot of those parking lots or just on park on the street. He stays in his van and then he'll like go to different restaurants or bakeries of wherever he's at. And he goes down to Michigan and kind of the top, close to the border of Canada. And you really can't tell with him at all. Like even like the typical things that we would think of Canadian little things that give it away. Like I don't notice that always with him. There are some other creators that I watch that like it is pretty obvious. But I think for the most part, and like I said, if you don't hear them say these words here and there, that you probably wouldn't even notice. And even sometimes if you do, you might just say, "Oh, they're just from from up north." Um, there's a little guy that we watch from Ontario that goes into houses before they get torn down, and it just kind of shows some of the architecture and stuff like that that I like to watch, and my mom will kind of watch. And every time she forgets who he is because there's a couple that we watch, but she's like, "Oh, this guy's Canadian," and that's usually not stuff that she picks up on too often. But she'll be like, "Oh, he's Canadian. I can tell the way he said this or that." Um, But too, yeah, and you guys also had like Australia and stuff like that, which I think this is gonna probably be a bad thing to say to you guys, but I think an Australian accent and a British accent sound very, very, very similar to me. I can kind of tell them apart the more that I hear them talk, and then like, what is it? Australia and is it New Zealand? Like they sound really similar. Um, so I don't know. You guys probably like super disagree with that, but let me know. Sure you will. But
Wait,
like
hold on, hold on, hold on. Okay, so before I begin, I want to say that I'll be using the term British to refer to just English in this case. Scotland and Wales have their own accents, and Northern Ireland is a whole other ordeal entirely. You know it as the British accent, I know it's the British accent. Let's just leave it at that. I'll also be using accent and dialect interchangeably, as they're technically different, but that doesn't really matter to this story, and they intertwine enough for me to give that a pass. Okay? Okay, let's go. Early on, English was barely a single language. It was more of a string of vaguely mutually intelligible dialects, kind of like Danish, Swedish and Norwegian. When the Anglo-Saxons first landed in Britain, they brought along the linguistic quirks of their homelands with them, leading to linguistics being one of the few things that truly differentiate Anglo from Saxon. These Proto-English dialects ran almost entirely along national and ethnic lines, and can be separated into 4 main camps. Kentish was a dialect based on the Old Jutish tongue from modern-day Denmark. Very little remains of this dialect, and it's not really important. Sorry.
really,
Northumbrian is the youngest dialect of the 4. Despite this, Northumbrian and its descendants covered the largest tract of land of the bunch, stretching from Sheffield all the way up to Glasgow. With foreign invasions through the centuries, Northumbrian would come to splinter into what we would now call Scottish, Geordie and Yorkshire dialects. But that's not really important to this story. I'll talk more about that on a future episode of England in Beta.
Do you guys watch this channel at all?
Mercian was the middle dialect, taking up most of England's interior. Mercian didn't quite have the same linguistic breakup as Northumbrian, nor was Mercia quite as literary as their Northumbrian neighbours. As such, Mercian experienced a much more gradual split, mainly between the Mercian heartlands around modern-day Birmingham and East Anglia, where their accent and dialect would become much more subdued. In the end, West Saxon was kind of the one that won out. With Alfred the Great and his descendants beating back the Vikings and uniting England, their accent and dialect would become the standard for the duration of Anglo-Saxon rule. By the time of the Norman invasions, however, that hegemony would come to an end, and any standardization of English would be torn apart in favour of Norman French.
Huh.
Right, for this portion of the video, I thought it'd be a fun idea to give it to someone who actually has the accent it's about. Everybody, this is Tom, a good friend of mine and a Wessex native. I'll let him take this one from here.
Hello. Even with the Norman conquest putting written English on a nice edge, the West Saxon accent would come to be the lingua franca of much of the common folk, spreading to encompass much of southern England. Sure, the common traits of the accent would dilute and warp somewhat as it travelled from place to place, but the core aspects of the dialect, most famously the heavily pronounced letter R's, would remain. The winds of change were fast approaching, however. As the 100 Years' War raged on in France through much of the 14th and 15th centuries, the English nobility would want to distance themselves from the Frenchmen that they had spent God knows how many years butting heads with. As such, these nobles would shed the last vestiges of their Norman roots and become proper Englishmen once more. Naturally, with much of the gentry living in southern England, the heavily rhotic Common English would no longer be seen as a peasant vernacular, but as the spoken language of all. Of course, this would be the common tongue of the people that in 1601 would come to form the Roanoke, Jamestown and Plymouth colonies in the New World, later becoming the 13 colonies.
So Roanoke is in Virginia. I have a lot of family in Virginia. West Virginia and Virginia are different. There's a lot of Americans that don't differentiate that still. Been separate states since the Civil War, when West Virginia sided with the North against slavery. But Roanoke, I was just watching a video the other night, which it's been on all kinds of stuff. There's movies about it. It was part of one or two of the American Horror Story series of the Roanoke colony and Croatoans and all that stuff and what happened to them. Really interesting story.
Colonies of British North America, and also Upper Canada as well. For the next 200 years or so, even with an ocean between the two, the British and American accents would remain mostly the same, bar the occasional slang word here or there. As you and I both know, the perfectly parallel pronunciations of British and American English would eventually diverge, for as far and as widely spoken as the descendants of the Wessex dialect were, a sudden change in the whims of the English upper class would bring the preeminence of the dialect tumbling back to where it came from. But that part is Em's job, not mine.
While the Wessex accent and its descendants had been spreading themselves all across England's southern half, one place it never took off were the counties of East Anglia, Essex, and most importantly, Middlesex, which contained much of the city of London. The people here had for years spoken in a descendant of the Mercian dialect that too had warped and become more diluted than its predecessor. Much like how the old Norman aristocracy viewed the Wessex accents, the gentry of early modern England viewed this strange Anglian dialect as vulgar, lazy, and perhaps most prevalently, improper.
Hey,
This didn't stop the people of London and the
us.
southeast from just speaking this accent anyway. In fact, they had the upper hand, as
Some
English
of
as a
it.
written language had been preserved by and was fine-tuned for the speech patterns of the merchants and lesser nobles of Anglian strongholds of London, Cambridge, and Oxford. However, by the turn of the 18th century, and seemingly without any clear reason whatsoever, some of the more educated nobles would twist and refine the local Anglian dialect of the accent of London into their own. Seriously, I couldn't find any concrete reason as to why this happened. A few websites here and there would give some basic reasoning of, oh, because prestige, or because Americans, but I couldn't find any historical backing. It just sort of happened. Even without any proper rhyme or reason, this accent took off among the upper classes until it, like the Wessex accents of old, became the standard for both written and spoken English, finally binding the two together again for the first time in 1,000 years. This is the accent that would spread across the world and give Australia, New Zealand and South Africa their distinct dialects. This is the accent that would go on to define the Victorian era, the BBC and 2013 Tumblr. The accent that is officially referred to by the government as received pronunciation, but the one you know as the British accent. So after all these years, was my friend right all along? Are Americans the vanguard of an ancient dialect lost to centuries of transformation, erosion, and the whims of the English nobility? Do the Americans really have the original British accent? The answer is, not really. The accent never really went away, nor was it the only accent spoken in England. It's a claim that's incredibly misinformed in the long term and only works if you decide to retcon most of English history and pretend that anywhere north of Oxford doesn't exist. In conclusion, we should just go back to speaking Old Kentish instead. Thank you for watching.
Is that it? Wait, there's a bit more. So just nah, not really. That's the end. Um, yeah, I don't know, because America is so big, and like you guys are very small in comparison to us. Have done a lot historically, older, more accomplished, but we're gigantic. So, just like there, you guys are like, oh, well, this accent changes as you go up, and there's this accent. Like, you guys have a ton of accents, very different. Um, and for an outsider like me, I can hear subtle differences, especially like Cockney accent, very very different than maybe obviously like the Queen's like accent was, right? Um, but for an outside, like all that kind of runs a little bit together, if because we're not used to hearing it super often. Like I said, even English, British, and Australian sounds very similar to me. Now, if I watched a video the other day, it had a British person, a couple of British people, and there was one Australian guy, and I'm like, when I hear them talking, I can absolutely tell, like, okay, this guy's the Australian. It's obvious, but if I was just hearing somebody that was Australian, I would be like, I don't know, unless it was really pronounced. Um, but here, where it is so big, like there really are a ton of acts. Somebody from West Virginia is going to sound vastly different than somebody from New York. Or somebody in Massachusetts is going to sound very different than somebody in Tennessee or California versus, uh, Ohio or Michigan or something like that. So, and it's been influenced too from like the Spanish, the Native Americans, Mexico, Texas is even going into Texas, you're going to hear a lot of different accents. Not that I ever recommend going to Texas. I don't. I don't. Outside of maybe some barbecue, there are other places to get barbecue. North Carolina has great barbecue. Um, it's just there's so many different so say like Americans sound or have the original British accent. One, I think, like I said, there was that video that I watched with the dialect guy. This is like the Appalachian one is very close to it. I have a hard time. I have a hard time reckoning that just because I'm very familiar with an Appalachian accent, and I would never, ever, ever in a million years think that that was anything close to British. I think for the typical American, you hear a British accent, and you're like, oh, like they're really smart, like they're really um, cultured and smart and well mannered and nice. I think that's typically what you think when you hear a British accent as an American. Um, I don't think that about any accent of an American. And there's no American accent where I'm like, oh yeah, they sound smart. Like it just they don't. We don't. Um, there's obviously, like I said, the Appalachian, the West Virginia accent. I don't. I have it. I don't have it. It depends on what I'm saying, who I'm talking to. If there's been alcohol involved, my accent will change. But typically, most people are not going to meet me and say, "Oh, you're from the South. You're from West Virginia." Here, even recently meeting somebody, they were like, you don't have the same accent like as your mom. My mom sounds pretty Southern. My dad sounded very Appalachian. You could definitely tell my dad was from West Virginia. Um, but like they were like, you sound like you're more northern than southern, and I've heard that a couple of times. But I do notice even when I'm talking, there'll be certain things, especially when I'm talking to people that are from West Virginia or southern, especially with my mom. I'll say stuff, and I'm like, oh God, I sound so West Virginia right there. And it might be like a conscious effort, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. You guys, do you think I sound like a Southern American? Um, I think with most people that aren't from the US, there's maybe three three accents, and you kind of put them, a lot of them, under the same umbrella. So I think for most people, they say like, oh, you've got a Southern accent, you would kind of just take all of these subtle differences that maybe it's not so subtle for somebody here, but like Texas and Tennessee and West Virginia and Georgia, Alabama, you probably just put them all under Southern accent. Uh, New York accent, I think, would probably be a little harder for somebody outside of the U.S. to distinguish from maybe a Boston accent or New Jersey. I think those would all kind of get put together just under that New York accent. And then you got like the West Coast, the California accent that's got its, very valley girl or surfer sounding accent. So I get that. So to probably outside, there's about three different American accents, but they're all pretty different for somebody that's here. Just as for you guys, like you guys are going to pull those subtle differences and be like, no, they don't sound alike at all. And to one of us, I'm like, it sounds exactly the same. So it is interesting. I don't know. It would be interesting to look a little bit more into the history of that. But like everywhere, you guys have been influenced by the Romans being there, from the French and invasions and this and that. And then you guys have influenced tons of other places. Like they said, Australia, I think they said South Africa. Maybe both of us kind of had a hand in Canada, along with the French. French is extremely big in Canada. But yeah, I enjoyed that video. I thought it brought up some interesting questions and thoughts. Let me know your all's thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed that one. If you'd like to explore some more dialect stuff, let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hype this video, help me out, and have an awesome day.